It's showtime, folks.
Absolute Cinema. Justin Lynch Beoff memes back for another video. Today we're doing 2026 Blackhawks offseason summer target checklist. Following the draft lottery, I thought this would be a good time to do this. We got some time. We got quite a few weeks before the draft and free agency begins and we start seeing some trades and free agent activity and the like. But I thought we'd get out of the way now, right? I think following the draft lottery, that's kind of where a bit of our focus is shifting as well. Obviously, we're thinking about the draft. We're thinking about what the Hawks are going to do at 4, but I think a lot of us are also thinking about what the Hawks are going to do, outside the draft, right? Is this the summer that Kyle Davidson ramps up the aggression meter and starts looking to acquire more star pieces, more established talent, more prime age players to kind of help bring this youth team along, right? Maybe accelerate the rebuilding process. I think now is probably the time, right? It's been quite a few years. Next year is going to be year 5 of Davidson, year 4 Bedard, freshly extended. This team's been, bottom dweller, basement team the last few years of the rebuild, but, we've done a good job acquiring a good prospect pool, young talent pool here to work with, a lot of assets, a lot of draft capital to work with, but I think now is the time to probably start weaponizing some of those assets we have to kind of bring this team along and, right now and kind of, bring about a better team for the present, not just for the future, right? So I think of all the cap space we have, I think Davidson, I hope he uses it, and I think this should be a big summer to watch. So yeah, I think also I wanted to wait until the draft lottery results as well. I wanted to see what position that the Blackhawks first round pick this year landed. If it was a top 2 pick, I would say that's not a pick I would say that would be on the table for me in terms of a trade. But if the pick dropped to 3 or 4, I would say that's a pick you would consider trading, and that's exactly what happened. I think the fact that's a number 4 overall pick, especially, is definitely a piece that Davidson would probably consider, moving in a potential trade. I would say more likely probably keeps it, right? There's still the possibility that Ivar Stenberg could drop to 4. That could be delusional. I think probably most likely goes top 2. But if we know McKinnon's going to go to the Leafs, but if the Sharks decide they really need a defenseman, and we know the Canucks like Malhotra a lot, maybe Stenberg drops us a 4. In that case, keep the pick. But we don't know that, right? We don't know that. But more likely goes top 2. But yeah, in that case, if he's Stenberg's off the board and you're going with a defenseman or Malhotra, I think you definitely consider trading that pick in a potential trade. So, but we'll see what Davidson does, right? We got some time to figure that out. But yeah, I thought I would go through some names here, some potential targets for the Blackhawks to look at this summer, this offseason, potential players to look at, trades for agency to kind of add to this team, kind of help bring this team along, right? I think you look at the Hawks roster for next year, you look at the construction, I think they could definitely use a pillar in each position. That's why I got, forwards, defense. I got 5 names on the board here on both the offense and the defense. I think if you look at the team for next year, if you want to take that step forward, I don't think it's just going to happen through the young guys, right? Yes, the full season Frondell is going to help. Roman Cancer coming on the team is going to help a lot. We got word today that he's going to be signing his ELC, so Cancer is going to help out a lot as well, right? I think, Frondell Cancer coming in, I think a full season Nick Lardis, I think Alpha Moore being back fully healthy. Knock on wood, Bedard and Nazar stay healthy, right? Hopefully you see some improvements in that back end, right? You want to see guys like Artie and Renzel take those steps, those strides forward. But still, I don't think you can just bank on all that happening, right? I don't think you can just bank on what you have. I think you have to be able to kind of surround these drafted pieces, right? That's kind of what the Hawks did in the 2010s as well, right? It wasn't just the draft picks, right? And we made those trades to acquire guys like Hossa and Sharp to help out the drafted pieces like Kane, Taves, Keith Seabrook, etc. So I think now is the summer to start doing that, right? We've been kind of quiet the last few summers, especially last offseason. Davidson kind of, didn't really do anything last summer, kind of just let he create space for the young guys to come in and kind of make their mark. But I think now is the time to kind of, look at what you have here, and kind of build around the pieces that you can feel confident are your core guys and can kind of, improving this roster for right now, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So, a few names in each position I think to look at there, right? Because I think you look at the offense, I think they could use another top 6 piece up there. You got Bedard, you got Nazar, you got Frondell, you got Kancerov, potentially Lardis in your top 6. But you look at that top 6, it could definitely use another piece, Bertuzzi as well. I do think if you look at that top 6, it could use another weapon up there, right? If Bedard and Frondell are going to be your centers, they need wingers to play with. Kancerov is an option there, right? Nazar is an option if Nazar is moved to the wing, right? If he's a 3C, no. But if they move Nazar the top 6 in the wing, he's an option there. Lardis could be an option. We have a lot of guys that, could be solid options in the wing, but I do think Bedard, both Bedard, Frondell, especially Bedard, could use more weapons to work with. Bedard hasn't really had that his first 3 years. He hasn't really had that elite line mate to work with. I think now's the summer, for him getting extended. He's going to be the captain next year as well, year 4. I think this would be a good summer to kind of get that for him if you can, right? Especially with the kind of Stenberg most likely off the board, right? Stenberg could still be a possibility. We'll do more videos in the future, delving into that possibility of Stenberg being there for if the Hawks decide to trade up, if they decide to trade up in a deal with the Sharks for number 2, or what they decide to do there if he just falls to us at 4, Stenberg could be a top 6 piece as well, but we don't just want to bank on that, right? Because let's be honest, it's probably pretty unlikely that he falls to us in the draft. So I think the Hawks got to be creative and find other ways to kind of bring in that talent, right? But not just the offensive front. I think you look at the defense as well. It's a very young decor of Alex Vlasic being your oldest defenseman right now at the age of 24, going to be 25 over the summer. Not just him, Kaiser Kreve, 2020 draft picks, Korchinski, Rinzel, 2022 draft picks, Stelmasho, 2021 draft pick, Artie Party, Lepchnau, 2024 draft pick. So the Hawks have 7 defensemen on the age of 24. I think they could probably use a solid veteran back there to kind of help bring them along. I'm not talking about another third pair of 6, 7 defensemen. I mean, an actual top 4 piece, an actual solid top 4 veteran that can kind of eat up those minutes, munch those minutes, and kind of take some of the pressure off guys like Artie and Rinzel, who are still kind of coming along in their development, right? It would take some of the pressure off those guys, Korchinski. So, yeah, we'll look at some names here. Some of these names are definitely a lot more realistic than others. And also, give me a chance to explain them first, right? Because I know a lot of you are just going to see names on the board and start typing away. You're being delusional Hawks fan. Which you might be right. I might be being delusional, but hey, we're Blackhawks fans. We're forced to be delusional right now. So, but yeah, just give me a chance to explain some of them. I agree. Some of these names probably there's no chance in hell they happen, but I do think some of these names are pretty realistic. I think some of these could happen. So, we'll get into it. Starting off here in the offense, first up, forwards. Jason Robertson's the first one. And yeah, let me just get this out of the way. Most likely this one doesn't happen, right? I think most likely J-Rob's probably a pipe dream. He probably just extends in Dallas. He's a 2026 RFA, barely. His birth date is literally, I believe, July 22nd. So it's a shame it wasn't 22 days, earlier than that. It could have been a UFA. But yeah, J-Rob is an RFA. So if he were to, opt to test the market and not extend in Dallas, that would have to be a sign and trade situation, right? The Hawks wouldn't just be able to sign him because he is a restricted free agent. So it would be kind of that offer sheet type situation where the Hawks would have to give up assets to Dallas to be able to kind of acquire those negotiating rights to be able to, get a contract done with J-Rob. So he's going to be due for a massive extension, 45 goals, 51 assists, and 96 points in 82 games this past season. Just shy of the 100-point mark. Somehow was not invited to the Olympic team for Team USA. Didn't matter. USA won gold anyway, but definitely probably, one of the few head scratchers of why he wasn't on the team, but didn't matter. If you won gold, you can kind of justify the decision, right? But no, J-Rob, he's been a top producer in Dallas since he's been there. He's always good for a point per game at least. He's passed 100 points as well. If you're looking at, probably the most dreamland scenario here in terms of what's the best option for Bedsy, for Pookie, it would be J-Rob. Imagine the impact of Jason Robertson on Bedard's wing, the magic those two could create. J-Rob's a very talented player. He's got high hockey IQ, very good goal scorer, sniper as well. Think about the amount of goals he could put in the net, Bedard, centering him on his wing. I think, the connection, the chemistry that those two could develop together would be absolute cinema. So I think in terms of if you look at the best option for Bedsy, what would get the best out of Bedard? I think nobody on this board would probably be more impactful of the guys up here than Jason Robertson. So, but at the same time, though, probably not super realistic because I do think it's most likely just extends in Dallas. Dallas does have a bit of a murky salary cap situation, but they do have enough room to extend Robertson. If they do extend Robertson, though, will they give him additional room for a lot of their additional assets they have to re-sign, guys like Maverick Bork, for example. So there are some guys that could be on the chopping block, but I think you're willing to kind of make those sacrifices in order to keep Jason Robertson. Jason Robertson's definitely a guy you look at as a core piece there. I don't think they can really afford to lose him. I would imagine his contract looks pretty similar to the Mikko Rantanen contract that was signed last year. Probably a long-term deal, around $12 million, 13. Well, I could get more at the Blackhawks, but I think he'd probably be one to take, less than he probably could make, to stick around Dallas. He's been a good fit there. I will say one thing of Robertson, very perimeter player in terms of his offense. Sometimes that fizzles out in the postseason. Not this year. He's good in the first round series this year, but sometimes his postseason production has been quite as good, and that is kind of another top 6 skilled forward, right? It doesn't really address. It addresses the need for a top, top line complementary winger for Bedard. Doesn't really address that sort of, lack of size, grit, power forward factor in the top six. So Robertson kind of would be another player that we already have, but just a way better version of that. So we don't have a player like Jason Robertson, in the mix right there in the top six. He would be kind of, after Bedard, he would be that second kind of elite dynamic option, which we haven't really had, right? Outside Bedard in the offense, we haven't really had another player even close to his skill level, even close to his talent level. And Frundell, is eventually probably can hopefully be that, but it might take some time, right? Hopefully he's in the Calder ready next year. I think he can be. Cancer, I think, has potential to be in the Calder ready next year, but it might take some time, right? I think Nazar has that kind of star potential. I think it's going to take some time, right? If he could stay healthy, I think last year he was knocking the door, until his injury, and I think he's shown flashes of it, but he's been a bit inconsistent, right, Nazar? So he needs to find more consistency. And you have a few guys who look at that can be that too. I think Lardis, he could be primed for a breakout year next year, but at the same time, though, he's, it's going to be his first full season in the NHL. So I think to expect that to happen right away next year might be a bit premature. So Hawks have a lot of pieces in the arsenal that can be, core elite players in the offense. Look at a guy like Alfred Moore as well. We don't know what his ceiling is, right? But a lot of these guys, like, they're years away from becoming that. So if you can acquire a guy that can be that right now for your team, if the Blackhawks want to make a playoff push next year, I think that, acquiring a piece like that, an asset like that, would go a long way towards making that happen, right? I don't think you just bank on this team getting better, if Bedard, Nazar stay healthy and, these young guys coming in the Calder running and making an impact, right? You're probably going to have to make some additional moves to make that happen. And that's why we're doing this video here today, right? Especially the way the Blackhawks ended the year too, because people keep bringing it up, like, oh, Bedard, Nazar, this team was in a playoff spot when they're healthy. And, when they went out with those injuries, the team fell off. But they did come back from their injuries, and the end of the year wasn't exactly very good, was it? It really wasn't. So the team kind of fell off the tracks late in the season with a young roster. So and I think it's going to project to be one of the youngest teams in the league at the moment, probably average age of 24, 25. So I think getting a bit more experience into this team, would be good for next season, right? If you want to take that step forward. We've taken baby steps in standings, right? Baby steps, but you want to see more of a leap forward next year. You want to be in that playoff conversation. Not saying it's absolute must. This team has to make the playoffs so the rebuild's cooked, but you have to make a serious jump in the standings. We can't be bottom five again. You have to be in that mix, kind of be where the Sharks were this past year at the very least. So I think, having a big summer for Davidson and will go a long way towards making it happen. I think the fact that he just got extended to, I don't think necessarily takes the pressure off. I think Davidson knows it. This is the summer to kind of, work with what he's got here and kind of start, wrapping up the aggression meters. So anyway, that's all I got on J-Rob. Like I said, this one, he's probably just going to re-sign Dallas. And my gut tells me he just re-ups in Dallas, but, and also too, like, what would that return look like? Because, like, they probably want a Frank Nazar type piece. Do you want to give up Frank Nazar? I think Nazar is an untouchable asset. I'm not giving up Frank. I think between him, Frundell, Bedard, like, those are the three guys in that four core. No, like, you hang up the phone. So, but yeah, maybe you would. I don't know. But like, that would be a hefty return, right? Even though it's a sign and trade, it would still be a pretty hefty return. Maybe not as much as the Nyes one that we'll get into, but you would have to give up quite a bit to acquire Robertson. But hey, you have to be willing to make sacrifices, right? You look at that prospect pool and this young talent pool. There's not going to be enough space and lap for all these guys. So you're going to have to be willing to make some sacrifices. Somebody's got to be sacrificial lamb. So, but I just don't think it should be Frank Nazar. There are other guys that I would consider not Frank Nazar. I don't consider him one of them. But anyway, moving on. We got Matthew Nyes here, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Similar to Robertson, both these guys are probably going to be in the thumbnail. But similar to Robertson, though, I'm not sure how realistic Nyes is. I think probably more realistic than Robertson. I think this one has greater probability of happening than Robertson, but probably the Leafs are going to be very hesitant to give up Nyes. 24 years old, 23, one of their core players of the future. They just extended him last offseason. Pretty good contract there for him. He's kind of on the verge of a breakout here. He had 66 points this past season, 50 the year before. Definitely, establishing himself as kind of one of those players that build around there. Bit of a retooling process in Toronto that's been heavily. I think it's definitely been quickened by the fact that they just won the draft lottery, right? They're going to have Gavin McKenna most likely next year, assuming that is who they take. They could take Stenberg, but most likely Toronto takes Gavin McKenna. You have to think, and I think throwing him in that team next year is going to make that process getting back in the playoffs happen a lot quicker. So. And also, it's also a question too of, like, what does that do if a guy like Matthews as well for his future trial? We'll get to him later, but yeah, for a guy like Nyes, if they were willing to part with Nyes before, it does feel like after that draft lottery win, they'd probably be a little less likely to unload him now, because I think Toronto they probably think now, wow, like, we could probably just skip the entire rebuilding process. We just got a first overall pick. It's our first year missing the playoffs of the Matthews era, the past 10 years, and So yeah, why would you give a piece like Nyes right now? I think that's a team that has a chance to get back in the playoffs next season, right? I think if you get a healthy year out of Matthews and Nyes takes another step forward, and you got McKenna coming in, you still got Nylander, you still got Tavares, you got pieces back there. So the weakness of that team is the defense. The defense there sucks, but they got a forward core. They definitely could score goals, and the goaltending's been sus too. But yeah, then you throw McKenna on the team. So yeah, I don't think the Leafs are going to be very willing to part with Nyes. I think if they are going to part with Nyes, I'm sure they'll at least listen to what you have to say. Like, if you pick up the phone and mention Matthew Nyes, like they'll at least listen to what the offer is, but it's going to have to be something pretty hefty. And we know the Blackhawks love Nyes. We know they love Nyes. We have heard from various insiders, sources, that the Hawks have inquired about Nyes in the past. I think multiple trade deadlines. I think 2022 they inquired about him. And the potential Brandon Hagel trade, I believe it was the Fleury trade. It's one of those trades that they were talking about that was on the table, but the Leafs denied that trade. And I believe they also inquired about him this past trade deadline as well. I believe they checked it on Nyes and were told no. So that would have to be quite a package. If you look at the player, though, in terms of if you look at this board and what player you think would best kind of solve this Blackhawks team's problem in terms of what's the player archetype this team is missing? What type of player does this team need right now? And Nyes is kind of exactly that type of player, right? He can play in your top six. He's got that size. He's well over 6 feet, 230 pounds. He's an absolute beast. He is that power forward up there this team is missing. We don't really have that right now. He could be that kind of Hossa type. I'm not comparing him to Marian Hossa. I'm not comparing Matthew Nyes to Marian Hossa, Hall of Famer Marian Hossa, but he can have that type of impact on this team, right? Where there's a lot of skill. There's a lot of young forwards in this team with speed, with skill, but they're also undersized. There's not a lot of dogs in this team at the moment. We got some in the arsenal. We got guys like Vaclav Nestor and Van Acker and Mason West, and we got some pieces in the arsenal, AJ Spellicy. We got some guys in the arsenal that can be at least in the bottom six, those type of players. Nestor could be a top six, but yeah, this team doesn't have a lot of that size, a lot of that grit, a lot of that tenacity that's going to be needed come playoff time. Come postseason, I think you've seen in Toronto the past few years, right? You could have a very talented team, but if you don't have that kind of those dogs in your lineup, you're going to struggle come playoff time. It's a very physical time of year. So I think Nyes would provide some of that to this Blackhawks team. And not just that, he's also a very good player. He's already a 60, 70 point guy at 23 years old. Imagine what he could do on Bedard's wing. Imagine Bedard and Nyes together, man. The absolute duo that can be. Nyes would be very good at being able to get Bedard the puck, take care of the dirty work, get in those dirty areas and get Bedard the puck. He's very good at the puck control, board battles, etc., things like that. And make life on Bedard a lot easier, right? It'll make life on him a lot easier. And very talented player as well. You put the puck in the net, a very good playmaker too. So yeah, Nyes, if you look at just the type of player he is, he would fit in perfectly on this Blackhawks team in the top six. Top line Bedard, that would be ideal. But you'd have to give up a Hall. That's the thing. You'd have to give up a Hall, a Taylor Hall. They'd be looking for, if you look at the potential trade package, they probably want pick number 4, which I'm willing to part with it. Unless Stenberg ends up dropping, then he probably ends up looking pretty stupid. But assuming Stenberg doesn't drop, pick 4 for me is on the table in terms of I'm willing to give it up for the right price. Because I'm actually going to take another, 18-year-old defenseman. We already have enough young defensemen in this team. But anyway, you can watch my draft lottery reaction for why, I explain my reasons for why I think pick 4 is a tradable asset. But yeah, I think they probably want that. They probably want, they want a top-tier prospect, like a Korchinski-type player. So they want pick number 4. They want somebody like a Kevin Korchinski. And would that even be enough? They might want more than that. They might want, Oliver Moore. They might want a more Lardis type prospect as well, kind of that second tier. And they might want another draft pick too. The Hawks have 3 first rounders next year. We have our own draft pick. We have, we have Florida's 2026 first rounder. That's actually transferred to next year. Then we have Edmonton's first round that we got in the Jason Dickinson trade. It wasn't the Murphy. It was one of the Murphy or Dickinson trades. We got that first round pick. So yeah, they probably want multiple draft picks and probably multiple prospects. I'm just guessing. I could be wrong, but just knowing, Nyes' value to the organization, to that team, they want an absolute, haul for that guy. So, and are you willing to part with that? Are you willing to part with, your top pick this year, a Korchinski piece? I like Korchinski, but I look at that decor, man. He's for me, he's the most expendable piece. I don't want to give up Artie Rinzel. I still think those guys have a lot of potential. Artie's too young. We can't give up on Artie yet. He had a rough rookie year, but it was his rookie year. Second overall pick, 2024, 20 years old, way too early. Artie's you got to give him time. You got to give him that runway. I'm not parting with Artie. Plus, Davidson will look pretty silly if you trade Levchinov after taking him over Demidov. That'd be him admitting that he got the pick wrong. He's not going to do that. So, and Rinzel too, maybe didn't have the rookie year he wanted, but I thought he showed strides. I thought he showed some promise last year, especially I would say back half of the year after he's called up from Rockford, I thought he looked a lot better than he did at the start of the year. So I think Rinzel's got a lot of potential too. So yeah, I think Korchinski for me is the most expendable piece. I'm not giving up Kaiser Kreve. They both look great last year. Vlasic's a core piece, Chicago native. He's not going anywhere. So yeah, for me, I think Korchinski is the most expendable piece they could probably get the most value for. I think Korchinski is a former 7th overall pick. Like I think he's still got value. Yes, he's taken a lot of time to develop, considering the fact that he spent most of the past 2 years at Rockford as opposed to Chicago. So yeah, his value definitely isn't as high as it would have been, a year or two ago. But I think there's still value there. I think it's still a piece that, especially a team like Toronto that doesn't really have much in their arsenal in terms of defensive prospects, right? They got pieces up front, but you look at their defense, it's very dry, very depleted, it's very aging. They could use probably young, promising defenseman back there, right? Korchinski would get playing time there. And I think the big piece to be interested in. So yeah, Nyes, for Nyes, Korchinski, number 4. But yeah, are you willing to give up another piece though? Do you want to give up a Lardis or more, right? Are you willing to part with that? I think you look at this Blackhawks 4 core, somebody's probably going to have to go. As you start trying to fill up this top 6, it's there's not going to be enough space in the top 6 for everybody, right? I look at especially guys like Oliver Moore, Ryan Green. Moore and Green sort of fulfill similar roles, right? They're different players, but they're both kind of middle 6, two-way defensive forwards. I think Moore's got some more offensive upside in his game. He's very fast as well, very quick player. I think he's got more offensive, potential in his game than Ryan Green. I think Ryan Green's definitely more of that Jason Dickinson mold in terms of a shutdown center, although he could also play wing. Both are centers that can also play wing, but are kind of in that similar tier of middle 6, kind of tier 3 level, prospects, young players, whatever you want to call it. So, bottom line, I do think somebody's expendable. Between, when you have all these pieces, Van Acker, Boisvert, Neshersol, Moore, Lardis, there's not going to be, not all these guys are going to be on this future core team. There's just not going to be space for all these guys. So, who's going to be the sacrificial lamb, right? I don't want to give up Nick Lardis, as I just think he has there's such a level there where it's I think he can be a future, 30 goal scorer in the NHL. I'm not saying he's going to be Alex DeBrincat, but he can be kind of that, second line, sniper. Look at the potential in his game. I thought he showed a lot, of strides, a lot of promises past year. I want to see what he could do next year. I want to see if he could break out next season, right? There's a lot of these guys I think we haven't quite seen enough of, where it's before you consider parting with them, I think you want to see if they can be a core guy here. I think Lardis type of guy you regret giving up. I think you regret giving up a Nick Lardis. So, but I could see him being an asset though. That if teams are looking at what's a young, promising 4 in the arsenal that they want, I think Lardis should probably be top of a lot of teams' list, because I do think he's going to be a future. He has potential to be a star in the NHL. He didn't score 70 goals in junior hockey for nothing. I think so far his games translate pretty well to the NHL, and I think he's only scratched the surface of what he could do, right? I think next year, full year in the top 6, at Bedard, Nazar, Frundell, Canstrell, I can't wait to see what he could do. Or third line there, with Moore and Green. So yeah, are you willing to part with a piece like that? I like Oliver Moore a lot too. He was a part of the Brandon Hagel trade. Which that trade doesn't really look great right now, does it? But it did start the rebuild. But Brandon Hagel's turned into a freaking point per game plus player in Tampa. He's been a beast there, and Boisvert and Moore, are solid, young players. But I don't know if any of those guys are going to be stars. I think Moore has more potential from that standpoint. No pun intended. I still like Oliver Moore a lot. I wish he didn't get injured this past year. That kind of derailed the season a bit. I hope he could stay healthy next year. Then we can kind of get a better idea of what he can be. But yeah, I think But bottom line there, it's we like a lot of these guys as Blackhawks fans. And yes, we're going to be, it's hard to make those decisions. You don't want to part from these guys. But at the same time, you can't get married to these prospects. You can't get married to these young players, because NHL, the National Hockey League, is a business. And, you're going to have to make some tough decisions eventually, right? So, but yeah, that's a question to consider. Are you willing to give up that much for Matthew Knies? I don't know. That's something that Kyle Davidson's going to have to figure out, right? I'm sure they'll be, reaching out to Toronto again. We heard from insiders like David Pagnotta that the Hawks will be inquiring about Knies again, probably come draft season around then. They'll probably try to work something out. So we'll see. I'm sure Toronto, I'm sure he picks up the phone, but he probably hangs it up pretty soon, depending on how much or how willing Davidson is to make that move happen. So. But we'll see what happens there, right? I like Knies a lot. I think he'd be a good fit here. Minnesota boy as well, so he'd be another, Golden Gopher. We Hawks have a lot of Golden Gophers between Kaiser, between Oliver Moore, between Sam Rinzel. Blackhawks have a lot of connections to Minnesota, so it'll be another Minnesota Golden Gopher player to add to the arsenal as well. So another American boy too, good American boy. So yeah, both Americans here so far. So yeah, another one too coming up. So yeah, that's Matthew Knies. Next up is Alex Tuck. The nice thing about Alex Tuck is he's a UFA. He's a free agent. So if he were to test the open market and become available, you wouldn't have to give up any assets for him. Well, you have to give a lot of money for him. Like you'd have to give him a hefty contract, but you wouldn't have to part with any, prospects, young players, or whatever it is they'd be looking for, right? So that's a nice thing about Alex Tuch. I could very likely see Buffalo just extending him. I could very likely see him just extending with Buffalo. Buffalo has made those strides forward this year. They're in the playoffs right now. First time they made playoffs in 14 years, however long it's been. And they're up right now against Montreal, I believe. So and he's been good for him. Good, top six piece there. Good chemistry with guys like Tage Thompson up there. He's been a good piece for Buffalo. Main part of the Jack Eichel trade they got back in return, which worked out, I think, for both sides, honestly. Eichel winning a cup in Vegas, and Tuch's been a good core piece of Buffalo. So, I could very likely just see him extending in Buffalo as well, like similar to Roberts. I think it's very likely both these guys just extend. But if he doesn't, if he decides to hit the open market, because he could probably get a pretty hefty contract. Because look at this free agent class, like. This 2026 free agent class is looking pretty bleak. It's looking pretty dry. So if Tuch were available, like he would be probably the top free agent in this class. So that's a guy too. I think 66 points this past year. You play him up there at Bedard in the top six, top line. I think he could put up 70, 80 at Bedard. That could be around point per game. He's good for at least 30 goals. Bedard, it could be pushing 40. 29 years old, so he's in the prime of his career, right? So he's a little further along than these guys, but 29 years old. I think Tuch, that contract will like at least $10 million, right? Probably at least $10 million. Hawks are going to have money to spend. A lot of that's going to go towards Bedard, but they will still have plenty of extra money to spend between the $40 million they have, over $40 million. Bedard contract, what's that going to be? 13, 14 million. If they bring back Mikheyev, what's that going to be? 4 million, 5 million. Tuch would be probably around 10 million if I had to guess, maybe more than that. Could be more. So you might have to overpay for him because there's going to be a lot of teams wanting Tuch. If the Tuch's available for agency, there's going to be a lot of teams wanting him. Would Tuch want to come? Here's that thing too. Like, would a lot of these guys want to come to Chicago, right? Because Chicago is a rebuilding team. They've been out of the playoffs for a while now, the past 6 years. I still think a lot of guys would want to come to Chicago. Yeah, they're not a great team right now, but it's like they clearly have something here where it's like they have the prospects to be a very solid team in the future, right? They got the best prospect pool in the show. They got Connor Bedard. They got Spencer Knight in net. They got a young, promising decor. They got other pieces around Bedard now. They got the Frank Nazars and the Anton Frondels. They got a good, talented team here. And it's Chicago. It's an original six market. One of the best cities in the world. It really is. Chicago is a great city. Blackhawks are a historic franchise. They're not far removed from the dynasty. They're not far removed from those 2010, 2013, 2015 Stanley Cups. They weren't that long ago. It's a United Center, man. It's, biggest arena in the NHL, one of the best fan bases. Blackhawks fans, they're very, passionate fan base. It's a market too, where it's a massive market, but doesn't have quite as much pressure as say a Canadian market would have, or even like a market like New York would have, right? There's pressure in Chicago, but it's not the same as a lot of those Canadian markets. So it doesn't apply to Tuch. He's a Sabre, but still, I think Chicago would be a desired destination. I think a lot of people just look at where they're at in the standings, and that's just the only conclusion they have. Well, nobody wants to come here, but they're a team that can afford to kind of provide that paycheck, and it'd be a nice place to play for a lot of these guys. So because you get a nice role here and be a core piece. So, but yeah, in terms of Alex Tuch, if he's available, I think Hawks should absolutely take a run at him. He would be nice on either Bedard, Frondell's wing. I think that'd be a good piece there. So. I think Davidson and Hawks, they want to have at least a guy for Bedard, at least a guy for Frondell. I think Kantshot could be one of those guys. I think, Nazar could be that guy, but it's like they're probably going to have to acquire somebody as well. So I think a guy like Tuch, a veteran in the top six, you probably want a veteran there because there's a lot of kids in that top six, right? You got Bertuzzi up there, but otherwise it's a lot of kids. So you want to bring in a guy like that. But a solid piece, not another mid player. Davidson's make a lot of mid additions these past offseasons. Anyone else to bring in at this point in terms of veterans, they have to be a significant upgrade. They have to be a significant piece. A star type player. No more middle six, third pair defense. No more Burakovskis. No more TJ Brodys. Nothing like that. No more players going to have to buy out, right? Give me actual players that can help this team right now. Not just be good locker room guys, not just be good for the culture, but guys who can perform on and off the ice, right? And be leaders for this team, right? Guys who have that experience, right? So yeah, I think Tuch could be a nice addition, but again, very likely he just extends, and this is all a moot point. But if he is available, I think absolutely you go after him if he's available. Next up, we got Robert Thomas out of St. Louis. I feel like we've been hearing Robert Thomas trade rumors forever. This is another guy like Nyes you'd have to trade for. He's there's no contract expiring here. He's with St. Louis. I think his contract expires in 2031, I believe. I think Nyes he's another 2030, something like that. Both these guys are up, but But yeah, Robert Thomas, you'd have to trade for him. I feel like we've been hearing a lot of Thomas trade rumors. A lot of guys in St. Louis, right? Because St. Louis is kind of in a murky situation right now where it's like they're kind of in that in-between phase where it's like they can't figure out if they're a contender or a playoff team. They're kind of mired in mediocrity right now. They're kind of in the middle. So, not just Thomas, guys like Jordan Kyrou as well have been linked in trade rumors. That could be another guy, Jordan Kyrou. But I'd be more interested in Robert Thomas, a center. So in that case, I think if you were to go after Thomas, he could be your second line center. You got Bedard, you got Thomas, and then you can move Frundell to Bedard's wing, because that's kind of the question mark right now. Does Anton Frundell, does he play center or does he play wing? I think right now the Hawks kind of have him slated as a second line center, but I think in an ideal world, I think he's up there in Bedard's wing. I think those two, will be perfect complements to each other. I think if Frundell's shot, his sniping ability, pair with Bedard's playmaking, I think those two would be a great complement. Frundell as well, if his size as well, good in board battles as well, be good at getting Bedard the puck. So I think they'd be very good complements to each other. But yeah, right. It looks like the Hawks want to separate, Bedard and Frundell. So in that case, though, but if you're bringing in Thomas, he's not going to be the third line center. He's not going to be the first line center because Bedard's up there. But I think Thomas that'd be a perfect second line center to where you could afford to move up a Frundell to Bedard's wing and Nazar be in the wing as well, because you probably don't want Nazar in the third line center. So Thomas could play wing too. Like he could play wing too. He could just play him Bedard's wing, and then you got but that's another playmaker too. Bedard, he's got that nice shot on him. He's got that toe drag release, but he typically reverts more to that playmaking. He's a very unselfish player, right? And Thomas is very similar. He's definitely he's around 20 goals, but he's always good for about 40, 50 assists. Point per game player, pretty consistently. Underrated player. I feel like a guy like Thomas doesn't get enough credit for how good he is. Very underrated player. So yeah, if I have the Hawks, that'll be be a package to get him. It'd be a package to get him. Probably pretty similar. It'd be less than the Nyes package. I don't think you'd have to give up as much as you would for Nyes, but because he is a little further along, and I just think Toronto and St. Louis situations are a bit different. I think Toronto's pretty clear what direction they're in. I think St. Louis, it's a bit more unclear. So yeah, I think St. Louis would be more willing to part with Thomas than Toronto would with Matthew Nyes. But still, if you're going to get Robert Thomas out St. Louis, it's still going to be a pretty hefty return. They're not just going to give him up for for peanuts here. Obviously, expert analysis here from yours truly. But I think this will probably be more likely possible than this one. I could be wrong, but I'm not sure how interested the Hawks are in Thomas though, because a lot of these guys too, like we know the Hawks are interested in Nyes. We know they're interested in Tuck. I don't know how interested they are in Robert Thomas, right? I don't know. We haven't really heard as much about him from insiders and the like, because a lot of these names are up here because I've heard something from the Elliot Friedmans and the Frank Cervallis or Pegnotas, somebody like that. So some of these names though are just guys that I like, and I just look at their situation and think, oh, it makes sense. But it's just me spitballing though, But yeah, Thomas, another option there as well, but I'm not sure how likely that one is. Well, a lot of these ones probably pipe dreams, if I'm being honest, but hey, it's fun to kind of come up with videos like this of like, what should the team do? Like, what would be a nice scenario to work with, right? Because you want to see that from Chicago, right? You want to see that big trade. Like, what was the last big trade this team really had? Probably the Spencer Knight trade last year, right? But you like to see this team make some noise. We've had too many quiet summers, man, of just anticlimactic moves. Just kind of nothing. We haven't really had much anything exciting besides the draft. Like all of the excitement of this team has been building in the draft, right? That's been Davidson's philosophy. Is it building the young talent pool, acquiring these prospects, these pieces in the draft? That's all well and good, but I just don't think it could happen solely in the draft. You can't just have a prospect team here, right? You gotta bring in those supplemental pieces. So, but yeah, I think that's all I got on Thomas. Last forward up here, Brady Tkachuk. This is a polarizing one, right? Brady Tkachuk is a very polarizing player. You either love Brady Tkachuk or you hate Brady Tkachuk. There is no in between. There's nobody who's kind of indifferent in Brady Tkachuk, right? Similar to Matthew Nyes, but on steroids, like Tkachuk would solve that problem of, this team doesn't have a lot of that physicality. Brady Tkachuk, he's a very physical player, right? He's a dog and a bone there. Very nasty player there, so he would definitely bring some much needed snarl to this team, but he can produce too. He's good for, he's maybe not quite point per game, but he's good for 50, 60 points. Probably can, produce more than that. Bit of a tough postseason though for Ottawa. They're swept this year, and he was pointless in those 4 games. We heard some different reports about his future of Ottawa, whether he's going to stick around. He's got 2 years left in that deal there. I believe his deal goes to 2028. It would not be unprecedented for a Tkachuk brother to leave a Canadian team for American, to cross the American border. I mean, his brother Matthew was drafted by Calgary Flames. He played there for many years, but he was traded in 2022 to the Panthers and went on to win multiple cups there. So could history repeat itself? After a few mediocre years in Ottawa, early playoff exits, and just a team that's they got a decent core there. They got some promise in Ottawa, but it does feel like a team that's kind of stuck sort of. I don't want to say mediocrity because they have been a playoff team the past 2 years, but they haven't really been able to make that next step. And how patient is Brady Tkachuk? He is the captain there as well. I got to take that into account too. Tkachuk has said he's kind of denied those reports about him wanting out, but that's just what he's saying to the press, right? So we don't know how honest that is, but yeah, Brady Tkachuk could be an option there as well. I know a lot of Hawks fans are very split on Tkachuk whether they want him or not. I would say like I'd rather go after somebody like a Nyes. Really, any of these guys up here, like Tkachuk, there's a reason that the order is the way it is too. It's kind of the order of how much they excite me. Although I'd probably move Thomas ahead of Tuck, but yeah, I would say probably this one as well. I'd probably say Nyes, Robertson, Thomas, Tuck, Tkachuk is probably how much those 5 excite me. But yeah, Tkachuk though, like if you look at come playoff time, that is a guy you think will come in handy, right? Although he wasn't very good in these playoffs, but you would think a guy like Brady Tkachuk, that type of player, would typically be good in the postseason. You would think. And he can score too, right? He's very talented. There's a reason why. You look at the impact he had those Olympic teams for Team USA, winning gold this past year. I think the Bash Bros there, the Chuck Bros are a big reason why that USA team was able to prevail against Canada. So very talented player, but also there are things about Tkachuk though that kind of make you that you become a bit hesitant because he does make some dumb decisions out there. He's not necessarily the smartest player of all time. He does take a lot of penalties. And just makes some poor decisions out there. So there are good things to Tkachuk, and there are also, there's some bad things as well. Definitely a polarizing player, like I said. I think he's a guy that, you love him if he's on your team. If he's not on your team, you hate him. Fans feel the same way too, right? So, but yeah, I think I know there are a lot of Hawks fans that would like Tkachuk on this team. So, yeah, I think especially amongst the older crowd as well. I don't know much about the younger crowd, but the older crowd I think would like to see Tkachuk here. Another thing about Tkachuk too is like he'd be great, protect the guys too. Like this past year, it's been great to see Bedard become a bit more. He's come out of his shell a bit. He's been a bit more physical. He's kind of gotten those brawls. But like, do you really want to see Connor Bedard doing that though? Do you want to see your future captain, your franchise player, your generational talent getting in these scrums? Probably not. You don't want to risk injury. Brady Tkachuk, if somebody's fucking up Bedard, Brady Tkachuk is gonna, give him he's gonna give him a taste of their own medicine. So I think Tkachuk could be nice from that standpoint as well. Like, he's not just gonna produce for you in the top 6, but like he's gonna step up for the kids, right? He's gonna be that kind of enforcer type. I mean, he's gonna be that kind of grinder in your top 6. So that this team probably could use because we don't really have much of that right now. He's got that size, he's got that weight in him. He's a tank. So I think there's a lot of good reasons to want Tkachuk in this team, but for me though, there are guys up here that excite me more. Honestly, there are things to Tkachuk's game too. Like he's not very fast out there. The Hawks have a lot of, Davidson's definitely been building a team with a lot of speed up there, and Tkachuk is not the fastest player of all time, but I don't think every player needs to be, that same type. Like Hawks have a lot of players of the same type. We need a bit more diversity in this lineup, and I think that player archetype like Tkachuk we're kind of missing. So I think it would definitely, it'll plug a big hole, I think, in this lineup. But what would that package look like? What do you have to give up for Tkachuk? That's the question mark, right? A lot of them have some ideas of what to give up. This one a bit less so. I mean, Ottawa right now, they're a playoff team right now, and they got a good core there to build around with guys like Stützle and Batherson and all these pieces. Dylan Cousins, like they're still gonna want to stay in contention. Like I don't know how much futures are gonna interest them. Some of these teams I think wouldn't mind future assets, but like a lot of these other teams, that they're gonna want assets to help them win. Right now, right? A lot of these teams aren't gonna be interested in rebuilding. So the Hawks have a lot of pieces. That would help a rebuilding team. I'm not sure how many pieces they have that would help a contending Stanley Cup team. So that's another question mark altogether, right? So, but yeah, and that's all I got for the forwards here. Switching to the defense now. And the number one piece for me on defense is Rasmus Andersson. Nice thing about him is he is a UFA. He is an unrestricted free agent out of Vegas. There, they acquired him from the Calgary Flames this past season. He's in the playoffs right now for Vegas. Right shot as well. What I like about Rasmus Andersson is he would take some of the pressure off of Artie Rinzel, right? That does mean though, like if you do sign Rasmus Andersson, if he does become available, and assuming he tests the open market, he might not. But considering it's Vegas, I think he's probably the most likely to be available in free agency. I think there's a good chance that he's available in the summer. Hawks would have to give him a pretty hefty contract because I think a lot of teams probably interested in a guy like Rasmus Andersson. But I think with Andersson, I think the Hawks decor could really use a top 4 veteran there, a very solid 2-way guy. Take some of the pressure off some of these kids, right? I think if you go in the next year, play a full 82 game slate with this U24 decor, I think you're gonna have some issues. So I think take some of the pressure off that decor, take some of the pressure off Spencer Knight, and whether it's Comesso, Soda's a backup, we'll see. But I think Andersson would be a good addition from that front. Right sides, that would mean I'll bump out probably one of Artie Rinzel that's playing Rockford because you got Crevier back there too. So that'd probably be what Andersson's probably on your top pair, and then Crevier's in your second pair, and then one of Artie Rinzel, probably Artie's in Rockford then, and then Rinzel's third pair. That's probably what happens there. So I would bump somebody out, but hey, that's probably better for Artie, right? Because we don't want to rush his development, right? We don't want to rush his development. If he needs to have that time, give him that time. But considering he just played last year at the Blackhawks, though, like, I'm not sure how interested Davidson would be in sending him back to Rockford. They did kind of do that with Korchinski, right, where he played his rookie year in Chicago, and then he spent the last 2 years in Rockford. But I'm not sure they want to have to do that with Levshov as well, because it hasn't really worked out for Korchinski, and I don't know if it's going to work out for Ruddy. But yeah, I think with Anderson, like, it would plug a nice hole there, I think, in the top 4, because like we've kind of making those mid additions in terms of third pair guys, but like we don't really have like a solid, especially Connor Murphy. The one negative of trading Connor Murphy, good leader, good guy in the room, good defensively, but you kind of lose a bit of that presence back there. I think Anderson would provide that. He's good too. I just think it's not just the veteran presence, the old trope that we hear a lot from these GMs, but he's actually very good. 30, 40-point guy, very good defensively. I think he'd be a nice piece back there to have. But there's a lot of teams that would be interested in his services, and not guarantees available. But I think of the guys on this board, he's probably the most likely to be available. I would think, unless Vegas finds a way to re-up with him. But I don't know if they're a salary cap situation, how that would work out. But I'm sure, knowing Vegas, the LTIR merchants, they find a way. But yeah, I would like. I think if Anderson's available, I think you definitely give him a pretty hefty paycheck, because I do think the defense really needs somebody like that back there. But yeah, that's all I got for him. Another guy is Darren Radish, similar to Anderson. He's also a UFA, unrestricted free agent. So a good chance he's available. Good chance Tampa also re-ups with him as well. So he might not. I think there's probably a lesser chance that Darren Radish is available as opposed to Rasmus Anderson, but he may want to test the open market, because based on the year he just had, I mean, Darren Radish absolutely exploded this past year. 70 points that back end this year. Absolute breakout year for him at 30 years old. Breakout season at 30 years old. But he had a couple good years here prior, a couple seasons prior as well. But yeah, another guy there where it's like, that's a top pair guy. Anderson's a top pair guy. Rash should be a top pair guy. I think Rash left shot, if I'm mistaken. So that'll allow you to bump down. I could be wrong about that, but that would allow you to bump down Vlasic. I like Vlasic a lot, but I don't know if you want him necessarily as your top pair left shot. You probably feel better if Vlasic is your second pair left shot, I'd imagine. So takes some of the pressure off of him. So yeah, I think Rash, plus two, it would give us that kind of power play quarterback, because there's not really a core. If you look at that defense right now, there's not really one guy that stands out there from that regard. The Hawks have kind of lacked that power play quarterback. I don't think we missed Seth Jones, but he kind of was that. And we haven't been able to find that since. I think there's a lot of guys that potentially be that down the line. I think Renzel has the potential. I think Korchinski, has some of those offensive abilities in his game. I think Artie hopefully eventually can become that, but he's definitely not that right now. If you look at this past season, Levshov just in that quarterback of the power play side, just watch him try to break the puck in the zone, those drop passes. It just killed me every time. So, and just his shot placement as well. It just was hard to watch. But so he's definitely not ready for that. So, and yeah, and Krebe is more of a PK guy. In Vlasic, he's more known for his defensive game as opposed to his offensive game. But I think Kaiser has the potential. I think Kaiser's such a good skater. He can walk the blue line. I think he can be that, but more known for his defensive game as well, like Krebe. But anyway, back to Radish. He could be your power play quarterback. I think with big reason why he broke out this year is because, Victor Hedman, he had some injury troubles this year. So Radish kind of became Tampa's number one defenseman. He flourished. He absolutely flourished. The thing with Radish, though, is like, was that a one-off? Was that a one-off season? It's almost like he played too good this past year. It kind of gives me 2019 Eric Gustafsson vibes. Not quite that, but he's a good defenseman. But like, I don't see him having that type of year again. And I'd be worried about the Hawks like giving him just this massive contract, kind of like Seth Jones. I'm worried the Hawks would give him, a long-term $10+ million deal, and then what if he falls off and becomes Seth Jones 2.0? I don't think Radish is Seth Jones. I'm not saying he's Seth Jones, but this one worries me a bit. Like, Radish worries me a bit. I'm not going to lie. Some team, if he becomes available, is going to give him just this absolutely ridiculous contract, because it's such a dry market in terms of free agency. Like, most teams, if you want to make an addition, it's going to have to be via trade. You notice that. Most of the pieces on this board are not free agents. They're going to be guys you have to trade for, because the free agent market is just so, there's hardly anything there. It's hard to have free agency these days. Most teams have to have via trade or via the draft. Even trades are hard to do these days. A lot of GMs just hang up the phone. They like what they have. So the primary way of kind of building a roster these days is kind of through the draft. That's why Davidson's kind of been doing what he's been doing. But anyway, back to Radish. So yeah, I like brother of Blackhawks legend Taylor Radish as well. So he's got that connection there. But yeah, I like Radish, but just like, I don't know. I'd be worried about what that contract looks like, and I'd be worried about him falling off a cliff after that. But in the present, though, he would alleviate a lot of that pressure in that back end. I think he's a good defenseman, but just like, I worry that's not sustainable the way he played this year. But we'll see. Anyway, there's a lot of teams that'd be interested if they become available. So anyway, continue on. We got Bo Byram next. Fun fact, this is the guy I wanted back in 2019. Back in the 2019 draft, we had the third overall pick. We selected, Stan Bowman selected Kirby Doc. Great decision there, Stan. But yeah, I wanted Bo Byram. I thought, very promising defenseman there. It took some time to get going. He's had a lot of issues with injuries in his career. Staying healthy has been an issue for Bo and Byram. But but he's definitely found a home in Buffalo there. It took him a little while there, right? It wasn't quite a fit there with Avalanche, but Buffalo, he's absolutely been a great fit. He's had a good past couple of years. He's finally been able to stay healthy. He's been a very good top 4 guy. Buffalo now quietly has one of the best defensive, they have one of the best defensive groups in the league because they got Bowen Byram, they got Rasmus Dahlin, they got Owen Power, they got Matthias Samuelsson back there. So that's a top 4 to die for, which is why I think he could be an option. I believe his deal expires next year. I could be wrong about that. I believe he has one more year left in his deal. And I just look at a piece like that, 24 years old as well. Very good chance he just re-ups in Buffalo because I do think they like him there. But also just I do think he's, he could be expendable there from that standpoint too, where it's they already have Rasmus Dahlin. They already got Byram. Not Byram. They already got Power. So they got 2 number 1 overall picks there and Dahlin and Power on that back end. And Samuelsson. And they got quite a few other guys in that system as well. So I think Byram is a piece that they would ideally like to keep around, but I do think I don't think they consider Bowen Byram an untouchable asset. He's probably your 3rd best defenseman right now, probably your 2nd best. But eventually you think Owen Powers, he's just going to get better, right? And Dahlin's that's your number 1 D man right there. That's your franchise player. So Byram probably your 3rd best defenseman. You'd probably want to listen to a trade. You'd be willing to listen to an offer. So it'd be a package, So it definitely you have to give quite a bit to get Bowen Byram because he hasn't under his prime yet. That's the scary thing about Byram. 2019 draft pick, and we haven't even seen the best out of him yet. Defensemen, as we know, they take a bit of they take a longer time, most of the time. So Byram as well, he's taken some time. It took him a few years there to kind of get going, but now he's really started to kind of get the ball rolling. Now he's been able to stay healthy and log in more minutes, and he's been a better fit. He's been utilized more in Buffalo as opposed to in Colorado. He's kind of buried in the lineup in Colorado because it's the Avalanche. They're a loaded team, but Buffalo, he's kind of more asserted himself as a core piece there, and he's definitely been rewarding them for that faith. So yeah, I think most realistically, I think he probably just sticks around in Buffalo. I think they like him there, but maybe they'd be willing to listen to a deal and stuff like that. Take a look at there. I think he'd be a great fit to that Blackhawks decor. You look at Davidson too, perfect age too, because he's just about entering his prime. I think with Davidson, they want to add that type of player, whether it's a forward defenseman. They want to add a young up and coming player is probably entering his prime or in his prime, right? Similar Matthew Knies. That's another reason why Matthew Knies is such an intriguing piece too, because he's kind of that perfect age. It's gonna be 24, 25 years old, right? So I think that's kind of the type of player Davidson's looking for. Top 6 forward, top 4 defenseman, that kind of 24 to 25 age bracket where it's they've already shown what they can do. They've already shown that they're full-time, reliable NHL players, but haven't quite hit their peak yet. They haven't quite hit their prime yet. They're going to be entering their prime as this Blackhawks team, is coming out of this rebuild and going to be entering that kind of playoff potential window. That's kind of the type of player that Davidson's looking for. Players that kind of fit that trajectory in terms of where this team is at organizationally from that standpoint, in terms of trying to come out of rebuilding into contending, hopefully cup status. So that is a years-long process, but I don't think Davidson's interested in adding more, plus 30 plus year old veterans that are going to be retiring soon, late 30s guys, no more Alec Martinez's, no more TJ Brody's, no more guys like that, Matt Grzelcyk's, we want, core players here, kind of those middle-aged players, because Hawks, these past few years, they've either had, teenagers, 20-year-olds or, 35-year-olds, they've lacked kind of that, 27 to 32 prime age area. That's kind of been something they've lacked in the lineup. So I think that's something they probably wants to address this offseason for sure. If Davidson's going to add that big fish, if he's going to acquire that big fish, it's probably going to be somebody in that kind of age bracket, I'd imagine. So, but what do I know? I could just be spitballing, right? But yeah, next up we got Thomas Harley there. Different color you might notice. I actually added a different name here, but I erased him and put Harley here. I thought about him recently. Lee Grossen brought up to me the idea of Thomas Harley. In Dallas there, number 2 defenseman in Dallas behind Miro Heiskanen. Similar age bracket to Byram, 24 years old, just extended there. I think he's there. He's locked up there until 2030 something. So another guy too, where it's you have to make a trade for him. We look at Harley too, like Byram, he'd be a top 4 guy. He'd be a top pair guy. He could kind of be in that one left shot, side, and you could blast it down to the second pair. And he could be your power play quarterback this team probably could use back there. Unless the Hawks decide to run back to all 4 power play they did at the end of the year. You probably think ideally they'd rather have 4 forwards and 1 defenseman in the power play as opposed to 5 forwards, but we'll see what they do there, right? But yeah, I think Harley from that standpoint, he'd be a minute marcher, right? He can play 20 plus minutes in all situations, power play, penalty kill, very solid defenseman. Stars, he's a number 2 guy. The Hawks would be a number 1 guy, but yeah, I think this is another one too. You'd have to give up quite a bit, but I think Dallas probably at least, they probably at least listen to what you have to say. If you hit him up, Davidson hits him up, Kyle from Chicago picks up his phone, Summer Kyle, and see what kind of magic he can make. I'm sure they at least listen to what the Hawks have to say. But what would those packages look like? That's the thing. I have a better idea of what the four packages will look like, what those potential trades could look like. The defense, I have less of an idea, like what will these Byram and Harley deals look like. I'll let you guys speculate that in the comments. So if these type of trades are even on the table, I don't even like a lot of these are just spitball, right? Like these ones we've heard stuff about Nyes, heard things about Robertson, Tuck, Thomas, Tkachuk. But like some of these guys too, like here, like we haven't really heard as much about in terms of how they actually link to this team. We don't really know, but if they're even on the table, like all these guys even on the table in terms of these teams in the trade block, possibility they're not. But I mean, I think any player for the right price is in America, you can always make a deal. You can always make a deal. It's always on the table. I think any core guy, or any piece I think that's not like a foundational core guy is probably on the table for most of these teams, right? A lot of these players on the board are guys that are very solid players, but like not guys you consider untouchable. Maybe J-Rob, but even guys like in these brackets, like they're good players, but I wouldn't say they're untouchable assets, right? I'm sure teams at least listen to what I have to say. So it's not like they're like franchise players that like you just hang up the phone right away. Like they're not like Bedard level players, right? So those type of players that like under no circumstance are you giving them up, right? So but yeah, Harley would be a piece I'd be interested in. Good age too, entering his prime, but I'm not sure how realistic that one is, but just kind of a fun one I thought of. Vince Dunn, similar kind of logic as Harley, and another these are all kind of that similar bracket, right? Vince Dunn's another 24-year-old, something like that. I mean, he's a little older. I think he's a bit more experienced, but 25, 26-year-old, something like that. Left shot as well, so another guy that could kind of, because you look at the Hawks lineup, it does feel like the biggest hole there from that regard in the defense is that number one left shot side. You got Artie Renzel on the right. You got Crevier. On the left side, you got Vlasic and Kaiser. But then it's Korchinski and Dalmasho, right? So the left side looks a little bleaker where they could probably use a piece there. And I think, these guys could be nice, options there. Vince Dunn in Seattle, very solid defenseman, put up, 40 points, good on both ends, very physical as well. I think he's got a couple of years left of that contract, I believe. I don't remember when this one expires. I believe it's late 2020s, 2030s, I believe. Could be an option there. Seattle's probably a team that you look at where it's like, what direction are they going in right now? Are they a rebuilder? Are they a playoff team? Like Seattle's one of those teams like the Blues where it's like, I'm not really sure where this team is heading. I'm not really sure about their direction, their purpose. So I don't know if Vince Dunn would be a guy they consider, moving on from if they decide to go a different direction, if they decide to enter a rebuilding phase, or if they decide to but if not, though, if they think they have something there, they want to ramp it up, then getting rid of Dunn wouldn't really make a lot of sense because he is kind of one of the few, core guys they have there. There's not a lot of exciting players on the Kraken roster. It's kind of a whole lot of mid, to be honest with you. So yeah, it depends on what direction they want to be. If they want to be more aggressive and try to, make a playoff push, because they've only made the playoffs one of their years in the league since they've been here. So they've always been a kind of mediocre team. It's not really exciting to watch. But so yeah, I'm not really sure, again, how realistic this one is. Like a lot of these ones are just kind of defensemen I like that I think would be nice to Hawks to target, but I don't really know if they're actually available. And what would the Packers look like? That's up in that's a whole other thing to speculate about. Yeah, I guess you could open up franchise mode and try to, come up with an idea there, but I don't want to give them so much an idea, right? Puckpedia stuff like, you only have so much an idea, right? So, but yeah, I think, in terms of defensemen, those are the five I got there in terms of options. I went through the forwards. Those are just 10 names. Those are just 10. I'm sure there are plenty more guys that you could think about. Some of these guys have been linked to the Hawks spice, in some fashion. Some of them haven't, or just guys I like, a piece I think that, I look at this team and like what they could use. For me, that's the bigger part of this video. It's not necessarily what the returns look like. Like, I'll let other people speculate about the trades, the returns. For me, it's more of just about what type of players should the Blackhawks target. What type of players be good to kind of fill the holes of this team, the holes of this lineup to make a push next year. Because I don't think this team can be in the basement again. I don't think this can be another year where we have to care about the draft lottery, right? I think the Hawks need to take a step forward next year. And I think acquiring a piece, acquiring one of these pieces on this board or two, maybe you get one in both positions, right? Maybe you get one on the forwards and one in the defense, right? I don't know exactly what that looks like, right? But and I think this is a year to kind of move things along and kind of just push this thing forward. So I also got a few names down here. You might notice these ones are not going to happen. They're not going to happen, but they're funny. In fact, I'm just going to put a divider here just to illustrate that they're probably not going to happen. I'm sure people will comment, but these are delusion. Like, oh, Jesus, my markers just fell. I'll clean it up later. But these might be delusional too. But I think with these ones, there's some reality to it. Like I think there's possibilities that these ones up here can happen. These ones down here are pretty much 0% chance. Maybe a couple of them, maybe, but they're fun names. A lot of these names have been in discussions, right? You'll recognize them. We got Connor McDavid. 2 years up in his contract at Edmonton. He signed a short-term deal last offseason. Didn't commit himself long-term to Edmonton, and hey, first round exit there. Like I don't know. He's been there for 11 years now. They haven't won a cup yet. It's just like I don't know. Like how patient is McDavid going to continue being with Edmonton? He was at an interview recently, and he brought up how teams like the Sharks and Hawks are kind of coming along, and like how long is it going to take until Chicago figures it out? Right? That's McDavid's words, not mine. So, well, Connor, I don't think it would take us very long to come out with this rebuild if you came here. Now, what would that trade look like? Jesus. Yeah, it must be signed with 28, but like no, like the Oilers are just they're not just going to let McDavid walk, in free agency in 2028. Like they're going to want to get a haul for him, like they got for Gretzky. But unlike Gretzky, though, no cups there yet before they trade him. But I mean, does McDavid actually leave Edmonton, or is this all just a bunch of talk? We'll see, right? But I do think he wants to win there. I do think he wants to get a cup there. But just how many years is he going to keep wasting away? I mean, at this point, he's still in his prime there, but he's still best player in the league. But yeah, like it's been after that contract is up 2 years, it's gonna be 13 years. It's just like how like as each playoff failure stacks up with each other. So I do think the possibility of McDavid leaving does become higher. Might still be a delusional pipe dream. I do think he likes in Edmonton, but just like he's got Draisaitl there as well. The dynamic chemistry that those two have. As long as Draisaitl's there, it's hard to imagine him leaving. But you never know. Crazy things have happened. Stranger things have happened. So you never know. I do think if McDavid were to leave, Chicago would make some sense. I know McDavid's been quoting, stating how much he loves playing in the United Center. Chicago, great market. The McDavid Bedard connection. Can you imagine the McDavid Bedard connection? Oh, the Connor connection. I love it, man. And yeah, just the storylines of McDavid to the original six franchise, like the Blackhawks, will be absolutely dynamic. Imagine that he finally wins his cup in Chicago. He brings his team out of the rebuild, and the 2010s are back in the 2020s. It's McDavid and Bedard leading the charge. Oh, feed it to me. But I think we're at edibles right now. I don't think I'm sober. We're living in Delulu land at the moment. But hey, as long as there's delusion, there's hope, right? As long as there's delusion, there's hope. But I also got Austin Matthews here. I think Matthews leaving probably more likely to McDavid. I don't know though, because the Leafs did just win the draft. Like McKenna's on the team now. So yeah, like I don't know. Like Matthews, his future in Toronto's been speculated as well. Similar to McDavid, 2 years left in his contract there. I mean, we thought the Leafs were going to be entering a bit of a rebuilding phase, but now it looks like a McKenna on the team. They might not be, assuming they decide to keep the pick and take McKenna. I don't know why they wouldn't. They did trade Marner last year. Not trade. They did trade Marner last year to Vegas. They signed in Vegas. So yeah, I mean that was just running mate for years there, right? I mean, the Matthews Marner connection was the connection there for a decade there. But as each playoff first round exit step back stacked up with each other, Toronto felt the need to break up the core four there and make a change. Marner in Vegas now, and he's he's actually playing pretty well in the playoffs. So it turns out maybe it wasn't a Mitch Marner problem; it's just a Toronto problem. So that's the thing of Matthews too. It's like I know the playoffs been a struggle for him in Toronto, but like I don't know if he'd be a struggle on a different team. I think a lot of it's just the culture of issues in Toronto. So I think with Matthews, he had a tough year this past year. He had injuries, and I think first year since his rookie year that he wasn't a point per game. I think he was below that. So, but still, he's good in the Olympics for Team USA. Won a gold with Team USA. Yeah, like he's the last couple of years hasn't quite looked like the Matthews of his prime. He hasn't been in that 60 goal range, 69 goal range that he was a few years ago. Nice. The last couple of years he's been dealing with injuries, hasn't quite been fully healthy, and his game's kind of chilled off a bit. But I think you get him back fully healthy, and it's just like, man, like imagine a scenario where the Hawks make a trade for Matthews this summer or whatever, and imagine Bedard and Matthews on the power play. Could you imagine that? Like that'd be a cheat code, man. That'd be an absolute cheat code. Matthews to Chicago. How realistic is this? I mean, yeah, probably not. I think Matthews probably more likely to stick around Toronto. If it was a scenario for Matthews to leave Toronto, I think it's probably less likely after the draft lottery. Just like Nyes, right? Like I think the Leafs, depending on what position they got in the draft this year, will probably be more likely to be willing to enter a rebuilding phase. If Chayka coming in, Sundin, but are those other guys, this new management, can enter a rebuild after they just got Again, McKenna, in the fold. They still got this core. They still got, Matthews. They still got Nylander. They still got Tavares and Riley and all these guys. So there's not a lot of depth in that team, but they do have star players. And now they got McKenna. So it's like, I think it'd be kind of silly to enter, to kind of, trade away some of those core players. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense after, getting first overall. So amazing how that works out, by the way. Fastest turnaround, can't wait to see him back in the playoffs next year. They'll probably still be losing in the first round as they do every year. That's the way it goes in Toronto. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to think about. It's fun to think about how that worked out. But just like with David, I think probably delusional. But hey, you never know. But it'd be nice though to see these guys come over. One of them come over and exercise their playoff demons and win a cup in Chicago. Kind of save their legacies. More so Matthews. I think McDavid's legacy is pretty safe, but Matthews is a bit more up in the air. But Last one was board 2. I just put them up here for fun. This one in no universe does this happen, but Patrick Kane's contract does expire this year. He is a free agent, but this one's not going to happen. Like I know we'd all love to see Patrick Kane back. I wish there was a scenario where he didn't leave in the first place, but that wasn't really a decision to make. It's not going to happen. I think he probably just extends in Detroit. He likes it there in Detroit. He likes playing to Brinkett. His son loves it there in Detroit. It's been a good, he's worked well there. He's fit in well there in Detroit. And they haven't made the playoffs. I mean, Kane and Bedard, since Bedard's been in the league, Patrick Kane's been in the playoffs as much as Bedard has. So all 3 years in Detroit, they have yet to make the playoffs. The Steve Yzer plan is not really working out too great there. I mean, he's been, since 2016, the Red Wings last made the playoffs. I think they have the longest playoff job in the NHL. I think we're up there too, but yeah, Detroit. I do think Kane likes it there. I wish there was a world where we could bring him back. We every offseason we dream about, what if we bring back Kane, and because he keeps signing those 1-year deals there. Obviously, he's got the hip replacement, so we don't know how much longer he's going to play. But I think Kane's shown he could still be a solid second line, 50, 60 point guy. Could still run it. You can still run the power play nicely. His hands are still there. His vision's still there. His playmaking's still there. Still put the puck in the net. Still a very talented player. Best USA-born player of all time. Not Austin Matthews. It's Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane is the best American-born player of all time. Set the mark this year. Passed Mike Modano. 500 goals this past year. Sucks seeing him, break all these records with Detroit and not with Chicago. I was hoping to see him stick around Chicago and pass Stan Mikita for the highest producing Blackhawk of all time. But I guess that's going to be Bedard's job now, right? He's got ways to go there. But 3-time Stanley Cup champion, best Blackhawks player in history. Unfortunately, having to watch him with our arch rival in Detroit. Well, I guess not. They're not really arch rivals anymore. It's probably since they're in the different conferences. But it's been tough. It's been tough. I mean, I'm still, as a Patrick Kane fan, I always support him no matter where he goes, and I'm always watching his games, see how he's doing. But it's just seeing him not, with the Blackhawks. It's never, it's tough, man. It's tough. Like I've started to come around. We've gotten used to it, man. Like we've gotten more used to it, but it still doesn't quite feel the same. Childhood me's kind of in shambles seeing it. It'd be nice to see him coming back, see the Kane Bedard connection. It'd be great, but it's not going to happen. Like it would have already happened. Like there's not a scenario where Davidson, in management, bring back Kane. I think those days are kind of behind him. I think it's a new regime here, and it's a new direction. So I do think there's a universe where it could have worked out, where they could have put Kane in IR in 2023 and still won the lottery, and we could have seen them playing together, but. Unfortunately, we'll never know what that universe could have looked like. But Kane's getting up there anyway. Like he could still play, but he's getting up there. At this point, you'd probably rather play the kids anyway. So I'm not sure where Kane fits into this team right now. Anyway, to be honest with you, but yeah, I can imagine what he could do. Bedard, the brains sinking out there, be like, oh, it'd be special, man. But I guess we'll never know. But Jonathan Tays a free agent too. But yeah, I guess I'll put Tays up here too, right? Where's the marker? Yeah, I'll put another delusional name up here. Tays, yeah, just fuck it, just bring back both Kane Tays, man. Yeah, let's get the Kane Tays Bedard line rolling. We're an absolute we're on shrooms right now as we speak. I'm just having fun with this one at this point, but yeah, those are all delusional. These aren't going to happen most likely, but hey, it'd be fun. It'll be a lot of fun, but that's how we cope. I guess this is all just a copium video, right? I'm not really happy with the way draft lottery went, so we're coping, but yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see what happens this summer. We'll see what Davidson decides to do. I do think this is summer we will see moves. I think there's been a lot of summers where things have been, maybe alluded to, but hasn't quite transpired. But I do think this summer Davidson does pull the trigger and make something happen. Will it be for one of these players up here? Will it be for somebody else? If you guys have a player in mind, feel free to comment on. If there's a player you have in mind, forwards, defense, whatever. I don't have any goaltenders up here. We got Spencer Knight. We're good in net. We're no concerns in net. So that's the one position we can feel pretty damn good about. But yeah, let me know in the comments what players you would consider. Let me know how are these on the table? Like, do you think these could happen, or am I just in dreamland? Am I in dual land? Do I know puck? Do I not know puck? Like, let me know. Feel free to give your 2 cents there. Yeah, for sure. That's what it's all about, right? It's what it's all about. So, but yeah, that's all I got for this one. Justin Lynch, Biak Beams out, and we will keep humming along here. We'll plenty more content here in the off season here. No Blackhawks hockey right now, but plenty to talk about Blackhawks at the draft, and hopefully, we'll do plenty more draft content, what should the Hawks do it for, actually, not just me reacting to the draft lottery, but like actually what the Hawks should do at pick 4, like what players should they target. We'll get more into it. I've already kind of discussed some of that in my draft video the other week, but we'll get a bit more into it, right? Is Stenberg falling to 4 a possibility, right? Do the Hawks trade the pick? We kind of talked about this one. Do the Hawks trade the pick? What do they do with pick 4? Well, plenty more content to look forward to. But anyway, and plenty more of this type of content as well. Like what should Davidson do this summer? But plenty more content to look forward to in that regard. But anyway, that's all I got for this one. Justin Lynch, Biak Beams out. If you like this video, feel free to like it and subscribe to the channel if you want more Blackhawks content, NHL content. All right, so I got this one. Justin Lynch, beams out. We'll see you on the next one, baby. Bye-bye.